Members and guests, please welcome your host, Matt Daly.
Something's in the air tonight. The sky's alive with the burning light. Come mark my words.
We've saved the best for last. Welcome to the retirement breakout session at the 2018 BECU Member Summit. I am Matt Daly, and on behalf of our entire staff, we're thrilled that you've joined us this evening. Just a reminder, we are live streaming this on becu.org, our website, and also Facebook Live. So welcome everyone watching online. Please join me in welcoming Amy Fink and Mike Teramoto on stage this evening. We're incredibly excited to have them share their expertise with us. Amy and Mike, come on.
May your past be the sound of your feet upon the ground. Carry on.
Well, thank you. What a great crowd. Thank you for having us. Thanks for being a member. So my name is Mike Teramoto. I'm a Senior Trust Officer with BECU Trust Services.
And I'm Amy Fink. I'm a financial advisor with the Investment Services Group at BECU.
So thank you for being a member. Thank you for coming. So I'll bet that some of you didn't even know that BECU offered both trust and investment services, but we do. We have been for many years. Amy and I are here to go through some common questions that people think about or face as they're planning for or experiencing retirement. So we have a limited amount of time. We're getting started a little late, so we're going to ask you to hold your questions until the end. I do need to let you know that we are not offering any financial or investment or legal advice as part of this presentation. It's just for your information. And with that, why don't we go ahead and get started? Okay, so we're going to go through a bunch of questions. Amy, the first question. How do you know if I can retire when I want to?
If you have a pension and you can count on Social Security, you might not have to do a whole lot of planning, but let's face it, that's maybe a generation before us. A lot of our parents could count on that, us maybe not so much. So financial planning, good idea. A couple of statistics. 58% of Americans believe that their financial planning efforts need improvement. 34% say they've done nothing to plan for retirement. 67% say they're savers, but 54% of those people have a level of debt that equals or exceeds their savings. So please put a financial plan together as soon as possible so that you can experience one of the most powerful factors in saving for retirement, and that's time. We do a lot of financial planning, and sometimes I think people are afraid to come in and do a financial plan because they think it's going to be painful. They're going to hear bad, negative information. They're going to hear the word no. But sometimes just little things make a big difference. If you were to brown bag your lunch every day, drink a few less lattes during the week, you could save up to $100 a month. That might not sound like much, but take that $100 and invest it at a moderate rate, say 5% over 30 years, and you end up with $150,000. Take that same $100, invest it in your 401k or your 403b plan with a 50% employer contribution. That ends up being $229,000 after 30 years. So little changes make a big difference.
Okay, second question. Where do I find money for retirement? Now that I have this plan, where do we do?
I have a friend who often says, look under the couch cushions. I wouldn't try that. There's a lot of places you can find it. Like I said, the latte thing is a good idea. But back to financial planning. We do a lot of financial planning in our department, and the service is available to everybody at BECU. And what that is involved is you're giving us information to work with, basically your financials of where you are today, point A. And we are looking at what are your goals, point B, and we're crunching the numbers to figure out what does it take to get from point A to point B. And in that process, we often find places where there's money that you don't know, money that's hidden. That's a really good idea. Come in and do a financial plan with us. What's an estate plan, and why would I need one?
What a fantastic question. So, retirement planning, a lot of you may be planning to retire, some early, some maybe you're going to work for a while. I have news for you. Whether or not you're planning to die, at some point, the likelihood is probably pretty high that it'll catch up with you. So, everybody needs to have an estate plan. What is an estate plan? It's a plan that allows you to decide what you want to have happen to your personal affairs in the event of incapacity or death, okay? And that's a key thing. It's not just death. A lot of people, when you're talking about estate planning, just immediately think, will. Do I have a will? Well, a big part of estate planning is planning for incapacity. There's a bunch of legal documents that make up a standard estate plan. It can be a will or a revocable living trust, sometimes both. Power of attorney, critically important documents for incapacity, both for healthcare and financial. Sometimes those are separate documents, sometimes they're combined. Healthcare directive, otherwise known as a living will. Some people have a pulse, some people may have community property agreements. Additional parts of an estate plan include beneficiary designations, especially important for those that have retirement plans, especially IRAs. Insurance products generally all have beneficiary designations. Account titling, another important part of an estate plan that people don't necessarily think of, but if you were to die, depending on how your assets are titled, can control on what's going to happen to those assets at the time of your death. Many of you planning or thinking or in retirement may not have minor children anymore. Some of you may be grandparents. Some of you, as grandparents, may have responsibilities for caring for minor children as a result of various factors that have happened in your family. So even as a retiree or somebody that's thinking about retirement, naming in your will a guardian for any minor children that you might be responsible for would be an important factor as well. Without a plan, what's going to happen? Well, in incapacity without a plan, what could happen is you could be subject to a guardianship. Okay? I don't know if any of you have experienced guardianship, but that's generally an expensive, cumbersome process that you could easily avoid if you have power of attorney documents, both healthcare and financial. If you don't have a plan and you die, what's going to happen? Well, the state has a plan there as well. It's called intestate, dying intestate without a will. And generally, it's going to be subject to state law, but generally, if you're married, it goes to a spouse. If you're not married, you have children, it goes to children. If you don't have children, it'll go to parents, and it branches out various things. But the state has a plan for you if you don't have one. Okay, that may or may not be how you want your assets to be handled. So it's important for you to have a plan because that will allow you to control who's going to receive your assets at the time of your death. I have good news and bad news as it relates to estate tax. So estate tax, as a good news is that it's now 11.2 million generally is exempt from estate tax per person, so that's good news. You don't have to pay estate taxes. Bad news, if you don't have 11.2 million, you don't have to pay estate taxes. So, you know, it's not so bad if you have to pay estate tax. State of Washington, the exempt amount is 2.2 million. So many more of you could be subject to state of Washington estate taxes. You may want to leave your assets to those you care about. Spouse and family, immediate family is what comes to mind for most people. But in addition, you may want to leave assets to grandchildren. You may have parents. How many of you have parents that are still living? If something were to happen to you, you may want to have, as part of your estate plan, some funds that will allow for the ongoing care that your parents may need as they continue to age. You may have friends, charities, nonprofits, maybe a church. Some of you may have pets, and you may want to ensure that your pet continues to have the assets and care that it needs after your death. Okay. Probate can be expensive, can be time-consuming. Generally, many attorneys here in the state of Washington, for most of you, probate's not such a bad process here. It's generally relatively streamlined, relatively low cost, not necessarily true for those that live in other parts of the country. Privacy is a reason why you may want to have an estate plan. Probate is subject to a court process, and it is a public process. So if you are concerned about privacy, wanting to keep things much more private, having an estate plan that may include a revocable living trust might be a good option for you. Cost savings would be another point about why it's important to have an estate plan. Generally, the more you can limit the involvement of attorneys, that's going to result in significant cost savings. And the last thing, dependents. Some of you have dependents that may be financially needy from you right now, and if you were to die without a plan, that's going to tie things up in probate for at least a little while, which could cause problems for anybody that's dependent on you for financial assets immediately today. Enough about that. We need to move on. Okay. Number 4, markets are volatile. I'm afraid of losing money. Where can I invest for low risk?
There's actually no such thing as no risk. Sad, but true. I need a show of hands. Who lives here in McCaw Hall? Who has an apartment here? Who lives here? Nobody? Maybe the people who work here may feel from time to time like they work here. They live here. But think about how you got here tonight. It was important for all of us to be here for one reason or another. How did you get here? Did you drive? Did someone drive you? Did you take the bus? Did you take the train? Did you drive down I-5 in rush hour traffic? Did you take surface roads? Did you drive a really sweet ride, or was it kind of a clunker? Those are all logistical questions, and everybody made them tonight in order to get here. Embedded in those logistical questions is a level of risk. We all assume a level of risk in things that we do every day like this. And we get to the point where it becomes sort of subconscious, but we all decided there were some risks that were worth taking in order to be here tonight. The reason that relates to what we're talking about is that maybe a better question than how low can I go as far as risk is, what's the lowest level of risk, or what is rather the level of risk I'm willing to accept in order to get the return that I need? And the bigger difference, the better. The lower the risk you can get to take, the best return you can, the better. Also, you want to know, why do I need that return? Which goes back to the financial plan. As far as where you can invest, there's a lot of ways to lower the risk on your portfolio. You can lower the risk by diversifying, no big concentrated positions. You can diversify between economic sectors, between different companies. You can diversify between large cap, international value. There's lots of ways to diversify. You can also keep an eye on liquidity. There are some investments that may have a great return, but if they're not liquid, that adds risk to your portfolio. You can also really have a good idea of what your risk level is and find an asset allocation to match that, and keep trimming your portfolio on, say, rebalancing on a quarterly basis to make sure that it stays in that asset allocation.
Okay, moving on. Question 5. Life expectancies continue to increase. How can I ensure I won't outlive my retirement funds?
3 interesting statistics. When Social Security was instituted, the benefit age was set at 65, and the average lifespan of a worker in the US was 61. In the 40s and 50s, during the heyday of, you work at one company, gold watch pension after 30 years, the average worker only lived 8 years after they retired, so small pensions. These days, a typical amount of time that we live in retirement is 20 to 30 years, so there's a lot more ground to cover. I have a colleague who likes to say, people don't plan to fail, they fail to plan. Again, financial planning, very important. A lot of people generally assume that you should be working towards 70% of your pre-retirement income, but that can be more or less. I mean, that's not a set assumption anymore. A few things to think about. Will you work part-time in retirement? A lot of people do. Are you planning for extreme outdoor sports or extreme couch potato sports? Can you work a few years longer past the time when most people accept Social Security? Every year that you put off taking Social Security, you can gain up to 8% in benefits. Can you travel now instead of when you retire? That seems a little bit counterintuitive, but sometimes if you're traveling and paying for that out of current income versus out of your retirement income, it can make a big difference in how well you retire. If you can lower your spending levels gradually as you get maybe 10 years toward retirement, you're going to be much more successful surviving retirement. What's your tax situation? I hear a lot of people coming into our offices saying, you know, I'm going to retire and put this rainy Seattle behind me. I'm going to go someplace nice and warm. Sounds great. Heads up, a lot of very warm states have state income taxes, and you have to plan for that. Healthcare costs, that's huge, and we're going to get to that in a minute.
Okay, question 6. I've created a comfortable nest egg. I've done my planning. But what's the best way to draw income from my investments?
We have 3 methods to talk about tonight. First one is the 4% rule. You might have heard of that. It's pretty simple. Basically, the first year of retirement, you take 4% of your retirement assets and live on that, and if that works, then you just adjust for inflation going forward. Bear in mind that only works if you don't try to do every item on your bucket list the first year. Plan ahead. Another strategy is the 3-bucket approach. First, keep your cash and cash equivalents about 1 to 2 years at a time in cash and cash equivalents, so it's always there available to you. That's bucket 1. Bucket 2, enough assets to cover, say, 3 to 10 years of retirement income. You might want to keep that in typically high-quality intermediate bonds and bond funds. And bucket 3, these are your long-term assets. This is your growth portfolio. And the last way to do this is consider keeping your portfolio in a combination of taxable, tax-deferred, tax-exempt, and other taxable investments, and work with your tax professional, your CPA, to decide when you take from which area for your income. The cost of long-term care is expensive. Are you prepared?
I hope so. The cost for long-term care is expensive. The cost for long-term care insurance is expensive. Everything is expensive nowadays. Something to think about, according to longtermcare.gov, someone turning 65 today has a 70%, again, 70% chance of needing some type of long-term care services during the remaining part of their life. Okay, of those that are 65 today, 20% of you will need long-term care for, yes, more than 5 years. That's according to longtermcare.gov. That doesn't mean that 5 years in a nursing home, but 5 years of some type of long-term care assistance. Long-term care can be expensive. It can be as much as $20,000 or more a month. Now, that might be on the high end. And for many of you, typical long-term care costs could be between $6,000 and $8,000 a month. 60 to 80 to maybe 100,000 a year is also very common, and that's still a lot of money. So, what can we do? Well, there's a number of things you can do. You can self-insure, and if you have sufficient assets, $1 million or more maybe, just for that long-term care possibility, yeah, you might be okay. If you don't have sufficient assets and you don't have some of these other plans, well, it might be a little risky. Many of you may own a home, and that could be a source of cash in the event that you need long-term care. The home could be sold to provide that money. It also could be used as collateral for a reverse mortgage. Some people think that Medicare is going to be the solution for long-term care, but as many of you may know, Medicare has some strict restrictions on what and when it will pay for long-term care. Typically, it's going to be limited to about 100 days. So a lot of people end up thinking, well, Medicaid is going to cover my long-term care. Medicaid has very strict income and asset limitations. So essentially, there's some assets that you can set aside and Medicaid won't count. But other than that, you generally have to spend down all of your assets. Might not be the best plan to go with. A well-structured estate plan can actually provide for protecting some family assets of a couple, especially for a surviving spouse in the event of a Medicaid or nursing home situation. So with the right estate plan in place, that can significantly help you prepare for the cost of long-term care. There's also insurance. Amy?
Yeah, traditional long-term care insurance, it tends to be expensive, but the longer you wait to qualify for it, the more expensive it's going to be. Most people wait to qualify until they're at least in their 50s. You can, heads up, reduce the premiums a little bit by extending the elimination period. Elimination period is the amount of time before you can actually take benefits once you get sick. Just be sure that you've got an emergency fund to cover that elimination period if you go that way. Another option is to go with a hybrid plan. There's a lot of life insurance products and annuity type products that offer a long-term care rider. That may be another way to do it. It's kind of a multi-use way to do this. You're purchasing long-term care insurance this way. It allows the funds to grow tax deferred. If what you don't use for long-term care goes to the life insurance. And the benefits for this type of long-term care may actually be higher on the hybrid product than in standard long-term care insurance.
Okay, number 8. What should be considered before rolling a company retirement plan into an IRA?
The short answer: fees, investment options, level of advice and oversight, and your retirement goals. The longer version of that: are you going to go to work for another company? Should you go 401k to 401k? Or if you're not, if you're actually in retirement, there's more to consider. Fees in 401ks tend to be lower, but the trade-off is there's not as many investment options as there would be in a traditional IRA. The level of advice and oversight you get, there's a lot of oversight on the plan itself, but not so much on individual investments within a 401k. And you get, potentially, depending on how you do it, quite a bit more in terms of investment advice and oversight in an IRA. And your retirement goals are really important. You have to look at distribution options. And each person's situation is a little bit different. I hate to say it, but back to the financial plan. Mike, you had something to add?
I do. So who knows what the big 3 are? The big 3 when it comes to health care and health conditions that affect people: heart attacks, cancer, and stroke. So the chances of dying from those 3 things are actually significantly reduced over the last several years, just because of the advances that have happened in medicine. So that's all good news, right? However, the number of people that are living with disabilities as a result of those big three conditions continues to increase. So basically, what used to kill people in the old days is now simply just disabling people. Why do I bring that up? Because planning for incapacity can also be a significant part of consideration in deciding whether to roll a company retirement plan into an IRA. One of the things that if you were to become incapacitated and you have a large retirement plan, who's going to take over managing that plan in your absence? Generally, it's going to be a financial power of attorney. So do you have somebody that is trustworthy, that can manage those assets for you, that can make and take distributions from that IRA to meet your required minimum distribution requirements to pay for your health care if that's what you need? So a big condition or something to think about that a lot of people don't think about is planning for incapacity. Do the provisions of your current retirement plan allow for incapacity planning, or might it be better to roll it into what's called a trusted IRA? Trusted IRA is a combination of a trust combined with an IRA. It's a certain financial product. Some trust companies offer it, and it can be a great tool for those that are concerned about planning for incapacity as it relates to retirement assets. The other thing to consider is beneficiaries. So most people with their retirement funds have named a person or people outright beneficiaries of their retirement plan. And for most people, for many people, that's probably a good choice. But for some people, that may not be the best decision. For those people that are in blended families, if you have stepchildren and a spouse from a second marriage, you may, at the time of your death, want any of your retirement assets to continue to provide for the surviving spouse. But then upon the surviving spouse's death, you may want your retirement assets to at least go back to your children from the original marriage, or maybe share with all of the children equally, or some other distribution plan. But protecting your original children from your original marriage, which your second spouse may or may not have a concern for, could be important for you. And that's another consideration where having the right retirement plan could make a difference in terms of your decisions about rolling money out of a retirement plan into an IRA. And again, a trusted IRA has some of those provisions. We're not going to get into any other details of a trusted IRA. We don't have enough time. So with that, we'll move on. Should I use a financial advisor? And if yes, how do I find a good one?
That's a little bit like asking, when you do your home remodel, should you do the wiring? Well, if you're a professional electrician, yeah, sure. I'm not. I wouldn't do the wiring in my house. Not a good idea. Financial advisors go to school to learn their trade. They take numerous certification exams. They have continuing education requirements all throughout their career. They're held to very high standards by several federal agencies, and there's lots of oversight. And they work at their trade 8 hours a day. That's the standard for a financial advisor. Some people do that at a hobby level. Some people put a lot of time into it to the point where they're nearly, professional themselves. They may not need a financial advisor. If that's not where you are, you probably do need a financial advisor. The way to find them, start with a firm you trust, because the values of the firm itself make a huge difference. Look around at BECU next time you come in, and on the walls you'll see plastered, always do the right thing and members first. That's what you're looking for in the firm's corporate culture. Interview advisors like you would a nanny for your children. Look for advisors with specialties and outlooks that match your needs. You can check out financial advisors at, might want to write this down, www.finra.org, F-I-N-R-A. And at finra.org, there's something called Broker Check, and all of us that do financial advice, we're there. You can check us out. And you can always get a second opinion. We're open to that.
All right.
One more thing. What are the benefits of a corporate trustee, and why would I need one?
What a question.
What a question.
Thank you, Amy. So, how many of you have settled somebody's estate? A family member, a parent, a sibling maybe? How many of you thought that was fun? How many of you had a good time doing that? How many of you knew what you were doing? Yeah, not too many hands. So, yeah, settling an estate can be complex. It can be time-consuming. If you're working, if you have a full-time job, maybe you have a family and kids, and hauling them around from soccer practice and dance practice and whatever other activities that they may have going on. You might be busy. It's just something that you don't want to do. It's not necessarily fun. You don't have time. You have a job. Oh my gosh. Enter possibly a corporate trustee. That's something that a corporate trustee can do. They generally are going to have the knowledge to get something done. They're going to be dependable. They're not only going to get it done, they're going to get it done right. Okay? What else? It's impartial. A corporate trustee isn't going to play favorites with various siblings. If two kids get along, two of the brothers and sisters, and one of them, for whatever reason, doesn't get along, a corporate trustee is generally going to treat all of those siblings equally or in accordance with the terms of the documents that they're supposed to be following, and not going to be playing favorites. So you don't have to worry about good child, bad child in terms of making decisions about distributions. You can actually, believe it or not, save money by using a corporate trustee. If somebody is inexperienced in handling an estate or trust, and if they end up using the services of an attorney for a lot of questions and a lot of the help that they need to get things done right, well, attorneys, you know what? They can be expensive. And using the services of a corporate trustee, somebody that's not going to be needing to go to an attorney and ask every little question about how to do something, could actually end up saving you some money. Corporate trustees, are they expensive just to hire them? Generally, maybe. So it depends. So at BECU Trust, I think we offer a great service in our corporate trustee services at a great value. That's not always the case at other big corporate trustees. Something that you should go ahead and investigate. Talk to corporate trustees and find out about their fees and their services. And for some people, it might be a good fit. Well, how'd we do? It is 7:45. Do we have time for one question or two questions? If there's somebody that has some dying questions that they're wanting to ask?
We should have time for just a couple of questions, because as I was listening to you guys, we should have changed the title of this presentation to difficult questions and thoughtful answers. So I'm sure we spurred many more questions than answers that we gave you. So if anyone would like to ask a question now, we could certainly love to take those questions. But also, you should have been handed when you walked in a form to fill out if you'd like to get some more information from us. So go ahead, we'll take a couple questions.
Thank you. I have a little question on number 7 for the long-term care. Amy was saying that to do a long, a period of time, and I was wondering, should you do like a high deductible, and what will be roughly the amount of time that you will say will be like 20 days or 50 days into the consideration?
I think they're roughly like 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, isn't it?
Elimination.
For elimination periods. Yeah, that's usually how it works. The 9 month is going to save you the most, but that's a lot of cash to have on hand in an emergency fund to cover it in case you need to.
And what is the average cost for long-term care insurance for somebody who's about 55 to 65?
We would have to do a specific plan. It's not really the insurance. So there are several ways to approach long-term care now that weren't available, 2 decades ago, because specific types of long-term care have become so expensive. And one of the things that was difficult, and why we found that so many folks, so many members didn't invest in it, is because if you don't use it, you lose it. So we have some options now, things called asset-based long-term care. So it's an asset base that invests and grows, and if you use it for long-term care, you get a multiplier effect. You put in $100,000, it may be worth 180 or 220, depending on your age. But the good thing about it is if you don't use it, you can pass it on to your heirs, so it's not lost. But specific questions like that, we would love to answer for you. So definitely fill out your name and stuff on the back of that form, and we'll get back to you.
Great, thank you.
We probably have time for another question.
So I'm pretty young in my career, but what would you say is the kind of net worth that I should start thinking about having an estate plan, or start thinking about that maybe I should consider having a corporate trust?
Sure. So everybody should have at least parts of an estate plan. So for everybody, it's going to look a little different. For somebody that's a young adult, anybody 18 and over, they really should have power of attorney documents, both healthcare and financial. You never know what's going to happen. The chances are probably low for somebody that's relatively young and healthy, but unexpected events happen. For somebody that might be going away to college on the other side of the country, and they have a medical condition. If they're 18 or over, guess what? They are an adult, and parents don't automatically have the right to find out medical information about their child unless that child has actually released that information to be given to their parents. So something to think about for anybody that's 18 and over, power of attorney documents. For estate planning, really, it's something that everybody should have in terms of a will and a trust, especially as you accumulate assets. If you have family, if you have children, having a will to name guardians is important. The more assets you have, the more important it is, especially if you care about who's going to receive those assets at the time of your death.
And so to be a little bit, to give you some numbers, because we always like to have some data to take with us, the estate planning exemption now is 22 million?
For a married couple,
yes.
11.2 million. But that's federal estate tax.
But in the state of Washington, it's what?
2.2 million
2.2.
or so.
So at the very minimum, you would need a more detailed estate plan. But as Mike said, really everyone needs to plan for this.
Yeah, and if you have those dollar amounts, that's only that you're going to be subject to estate tax. And that may not be the most important concern that you have. You may have a child that has disabilities. Having an estate plan, even if you only have $100,000, would be critically important to preserve those assets for the benefit of your disabled child.
We've got time for another question.
So I have all of my checking, savings, eventually probably home loan through you guys. It's never actually occurred to me to look at BECU potentially for investments. Right now I'm with someone in the league of like Edward Jones, Charles Schwab, and I know as much as this isn't designed to be an advertisement, for you guys, I'm actually really curious, and I wonder if other people would be as well, to know a little bit more about what it would look like if we, like what type of investment services you do offer, anything you can tell me about like what you think strengths are compared to some of our alternatives. So I'm kind of asking you to sell yourself just a little bit to know what one could expect working with BECU.
Amy's deferring to me on that one. I'll start with a generic answer of we have a full service, full capability investment and trust program. So anything that our members can avail themselves of at any of the large firms you've heard of, you can certainly do it with us. And we would love to be able to help our members complete everything they need. We'd love to become your trusted financial institution. One of the things that we believe most importantly is every member deserves a quality financial plan, and we start from there. So I think that's where our value proposition starts from. I think that might be where we can excel compared to other firms. The other thing is the two things that we heard our CEO, Benson Porter, talking about earlier was people helping people and members first. So that's the way we approach not only investments in trust, but everything we do at BECU. So I think that's probably one of the most important items that you need to think about when you're choosing a financial advisor or a trust company. And that's our approach. So we would love to help, and we know we are the best kept secret at BECU. So thank you for the question.
Let me add to that. Tomorrow, I have somebody coming into my office asking for a second opinion on just that kind of portfolio. So it's totally okay to come and ask us even just that. And do we have another question?
Sure, we'll do one more.
I have a very quick question. Amy, in the beginning you said invest $100 a week, $100 a month at a 5% rate of return. Is 5% something you can get easily, being somebody that's kind of risk averse? Is that something you can get easily? And if so, where would I go to look for that?
I'd say that's somewhere between conservative and moderate. So we would need to narrow down your risk profile. and find something that fits really well for you. And we also have market conditions to consider, but that's the first thing I would do if you came into my office and say, let me learn more about you and narrow down your risk profile so I can find something that's really well suited to you.
So when it comes to risk, there's no free lunch. So if you want more return, you have to take on more risk, or you need to take more time. So those are the two things we would balance to try to get you to your goals. So depending where you are now and where you'd like to be. But yes, I think it is possible to do that. Mike, Amy, thank you very much for your time, and thank everyone here for taking the time to think about your future. And thank you for the commercial for BECU Trust and BECU Investments. So thank you so much, you guys. If you wouldn't mind, do take a moment and fill out the scorecard or the response card so we know how we did. And also, there's a separate sheet in there, so if you have specific questions, leave it with one of our moderators at the door, and we will get back to you. And then finally, if neither one of those work for you, please go on to becu.org and click on either trust or investments, and there'll be a very easy to fill out form where you can get information from us. So thank you very much for coming to the BECU Summit in 2018. Thank you. Good night now.